My dream was always to get my own place. Ever since high school, I couldn't wait to move out. My relationship with my parents was terrible. My dad would get drunk every weekend, and my mom wasn't around much either. We constantly fought, and as I got older and started dating, it became even worse. There was no way I could bring anyone back to that house. So when I turned 19 and started going to a local commuter college, I took the first chance I could get to move out. I spent weeks searching Zillow, Facebook Marketplace, and Craigslist every single day. When I finally found a rental that looked promising and fit my budget, I scheduled a viewing immediately. The apartment was perfect for what I needed. Walking in, you entered a combined living room and dining area, one open space. The kitchen was adjacent, separated by a wall. Down the hallway were two closets, one I planned to use as a pantry and the other for storage, plus a bathroom. At the end of the hall was the bedroom, which was surprisingly spacious. It could easily fit a queen-sized bed, had two closets, and I knew I could fit a couple of dressers and a TV in there without any problem. Best of all, it was budget-friendly. I signed the lease and moved in the next month. Life was fine for the first few months. I was enjoying my independence and finally had the freedom I'd always wanted. One night, I went out with friends in town and we ran into some girls we knew from school. I ended up bringing this girl back to my place. I'll call her Sammy. We'd known each other for a while but had never hung out one-on-one like this. We had some drinks at my apartment and put on a movie, but that was really all we did. She didn't want to take things further on our first time hanging out, and I respected that completely. We ended up in my bedroom to finish the movie we'd started in the living room, and I think we both just passed out from the alcohol somewhere in the middle of it. The next thing I remember, I woke up to footsteps in the hallway. It was still the middle of the night, completely dark. I looked to my side and realized I was alone in bed. Sammy was gone. I sat up and looked down the hallway toward the living room. I could see her silhouette in the dim light, quietly gathering her things from the couch. She was clearly trying to leave without waking me, probably to avoid any awkwardness in the morning. I understood, so I didn't say anything. I just quietly went back to bed and listened as she eventually walked out the front door. Just to be sure, I called out her name. No response. She was definitely gone. I got comfortable again and drifted back to sleep pretty quickly. It must have been about an hour later when I was jolted awake by a loud noise somewhere in the apartment. I shot up in bed, my heart immediately pounding. I called out Sammy's name again, thinking maybe she'd come back for something she forgot. Nothing. No response at all. I was honestly scared to get up and check. The apartment was completely silent now, which somehow made it worse. So I did something that felt weird even as I was doing it. I grabbed my phone and texted Sammy, asking if she was still in my apartment. I knew it sounded paranoid, but I was genuinely frightened in that moment. I looked toward my bedroom door, which was still open because I'd been too lazy to close it after Sammy left. I was still a little drunk from all the shots we'd been taking earlier, but I could swear I saw something near the doorframe. Something that shouldn't be there. My breathing got heavier. I still can't believe I had the courage to do this, but I swiped down on my iPhone screen to open the control center and pressed the flashlight button. With my phone still pointed at the door, I turned on the light. There were two hands wrapped around the doorframe. Human hands, gripping the edge of the door. And the moment my flashlight revealed them, whoever they belonged to tightened their grip and then quickly pulled back out of sight. The scream I'd been holding in for those few seconds finally came out. I screamed in pure terror, yelling, "Get out! Get out!" over and over again. By the time I finally forced myself to get up and look down the hallway, it appeared empty. I immediately flipped on the light. After a few minutes of trying to calm my breathing and just listening for any sounds, I built up enough courage to check the hallway closets and the bathroom. They were all clear. Then I moved into the main living area. Trust me, there weren't many places to hide in that small apartment. I crept to the nearest light switch, holding my phone like it was some kind of weapon, and turned on the lights. I felt instantly better when the living space was lit up, but I still had to check the kitchen. I slowly approached the kitchen entrance and flicked that light on too, finally illuminating the entire apartment. There was nobody there. I looked behind the couch, under the tables. I even checked the floor-level kitchen cabinets. When I confirmed it was completely clear, I ran to the front door to lock it. But here's what was strange. I never heard the front door close after I saw those hands, and yet there wasn't a single person in the apartment except me. How could someone have left without me hearing the door? I tried calling Sammy repeatedly until she finally picked up. She sounded tired and confused, obviously since I was calling her at like 3 in the morning. I asked her if she'd just been in my apartment, and she told me no, she'd left a while ago because she couldn't sleep. I didn't explain what happened. I just told her I thought I heard a noise and we hung up. Then I started spam calling my best friend until he picked up, also sounding exhausted and confused. I explained everything that had just happened, and he said he could tell I was still drunk. But his explanation actually calmed me down a bit. He suggested I was sleep-deprived and still intoxicated, and what I experienced was probably a half-awake hallucination. It actually made sense, especially considering I never heard the front door shut. There was no way someone could have gotten out without me hearing it. I eventually laughed it off and apologized for waking him up. I went back to my bedroom, shut and locked the door this time, and somehow managed to calm myself down enough to fall back asleep. The next morning, I did another thorough search of the apartment in the daylight, and it was definitely clear. Everything seemed normal. So I went on with my day, trying to convince myself it had all been in my head. But at some point that afternoon, I thought back to that supposed hallucination. Those hands wrapped around the doorframe. I walked back to my bedroom and examined the doorframe carefully. I think my heart stopped for a moment when I saw them. Clear fingerprints, left in the exact positions where the hands had been gripping the frame. Multiple fingerprints, like someone had been holding on tight. I felt dizzy as the realization hit me. It wasn't a hallucination. Someone had actually been in my apartment that I took a picture of the fingerprints, which I still have saved in my iCloud to this day. I didn't know what else to do, so I called my dad for advice. He basically called me an idiot for not locking the door and said as long as nothing was stolen and nobody was there anymore, I should just take it as a valuable lesson. And honestly, as much as I hated to admit it, everything he said was true. I'd been careless. I still don't know who came into my apartment that night. I don't know why they chose to do literally the creepiest thing possible instead of just robbing me or whatever. But after my year-long lease was up, I moved to a different apartment and never looked back. I always lock my doors now. Boys. My parents' house never really felt like a traditional family home, at least not in the normal way. My dad traveled constantly for work, and my mom was always out with friends, staying at my aunt's house, or doing something else that kept her away. She'd come home late or sometimes not at all. I know that sounds messed up, but it was just our reality. It wasn't like they abandoned me or anything. They were just always busy, always somewhere else. From the time I was about 16 and up, I basically lived alone in that house. I'd eat dinner by myself most nights. I'd watch TV alone. Sometimes I'd be the only person in the house for entire weekends. I'm an only child, and I think my parents realized after having me how much they valued their freedom. Looking back as an adult, I can see how that affected me. But when I was younger, I actually loved it. It felt like freedom, having such a big place to myself. I could do whatever I wanted without my parents breathing down my neck. I could have friends over and stay up late playing games. I could talk to girls on the phone without being embarrassed. It was like having my own house without having to pay for it. When I turned 19 and started attending a nearby college, nothing changed. If anything, my parents were gone even more often. I was basically just maintaining the house on my own. I knew every sound that house made too, and that's important because it wasn't one of those old houses where every creak freaked you out. It was an older home, sure, but it was large and had its usual, familiar sounds. I always said the place had character. This particular incident happened on a night when I knew for certain I'd be alone. My dad was out of town for work, and my mom had been talking all week about staying at my aunt's house because they were having some big family event the next day and she didn't want to drive back late. I remember her telling me, "It's just you tonight," and I honestly didn't even care. That was completely normal for me. I told her she didn't even need to mention it. I made myself dinner, watched some TV, did my usual routine. Around 11 p.m., I went upstairs to my room and started watching YouTube videos in bed, something I'd often do for hours. My room was at the end of the hallway on the second floor. At the top of the stairs was a small landing, and to the right was my parents' room. Further down the hallway was the bathroom, a linen closet, and then my room at the very end. I kept my door open because my parents had always told me to keep doors open at night. It was more of a safety thing, staying alert and listening for potential intruders. But I also just liked hearing the ambient sounds of the house. It made being alone feel less intense. Eventually I started getting tired, so I closed my laptop and just lay there scrolling through my phone. I'd say about an hour passed when suddenly my phone rang. The screen said, "No caller ID." That was the first time I'd ever received a call like that. I stared at it for a second. Getting an anonymous call that late at night seemed sketchy as hell. I ignored it, but immediately after it stopped ringing, it started again. Still showing no caller ID. That's what made me answer. I figured if it was someone important, they'd call twice, right? Plus, it was just a phone call. Worst case scenario, I'd just hang up. So I answered. At first, there was complete silence. I got nervous, thinking it might be one of those scam calls that check if a number is active to add it to some call center database. But then I started hearing something faint in the background, and it took my brain a second to process what it was. It sounded like a TV playing. And here's what was weird. I could also faintly hear my own TV downstairs through my open door because I'd left it on in the living room earlier. I didn't have it loud, just low volume as background noise. So hearing TV audio through the phone immediately made my stomach tighten. I said hello again, but there was no response. Just that TV sound. Like whoever was on the other end wasn't even trying to speak. They were just there listening. Then I realized something that made me sit straight up in bed. The TV noise I was hearing through the phone wasn't random. It matched my TV downstairs. Perfectly. It wasn't delayed or anything. It was the exact same audio at the exact same moments, completely in sync. That's when I felt this cold sensation run down my spine, because there's only one way that makes sense. Whoever was on the phone could hear my TV in real time, which meant they were inside my house. Downstairs. I tried to force myself to think of normal explanations. Maybe it was a friend standing outside one of the windows downstairs trying to prank me. Or maybe the call was somehow glitching and picking up my microphone audio. That can happen with phones, right? But the more I listened, the more I realized those explanations didn't make sense. It sounded exactly like someone was calling me while standing somewhere in my living room. I got up from my bed and walked to my bedroom door to listen more carefully. And yeah, I was absolutely certain now. The audio coming through the phone was perfectly synced with my TV downstairs. In hindsight, what I did next was probably stupid, but I yelled out, "Who's down there?" Because part of me still thought maybe it was a friend or family member pulling some kind of prank. And then the line went dead. They hung up. My mouth went completely dry. I couldn't even call the number back because it was anonymous. I walked out into the hallway toward the stairs and looked down. I could still hear my TV on in the living room. And then I heard it. A creak. It sounded like the wood floor cracking under the pressure of someone's weight. But if that didn't confirm things, the moment I heard someone clearing their throat downstairs, that's when everything became horrifyingly real. I couldn't lean on the glitching phone theory anymore, even though deep down I already knew that was bullshit. I went back to my room and quietly closed and locked my door. My mind was racing. What if this was my dad testing me, seeing how I'd react to a home intrusion scenario? Or maybe my uncle? My dad had a weird sense of humor sometimes. So I called my dad, but he didn't pick up. He might have already been asleep since it was 11:30. I called again and again, but no luck. Then I tried my uncle, and thankfully he picked up on the second ring. I could tell he was in bed. He asked why I was calling so late, and I prefaced everything by saying this might sound crazy. Then I asked him if he was downstairs in my house. I remember his exact response and tone so clearly. He said, "Steve, what the hell are you talking about?" When I explained what was happening, he told me that's definitely something his brother, my dad, would do. While we were on the phone, my screen started buzzing with another call. I looked down and saw no caller ID. I begged my uncle to stay on the line and told him I was putting him on hold to answer the other call. He said okay. I switched to the incoming call and said hello. Same silence at first. This time I didn't hear the TV sounds on the other end anymore. What did that mean? Had they moved away from the living room? But the phone seemed to be on speaker because I could hear footsteps. They were moving. And the footsteps I was hearing through the phone were matching the footsteps I suddenly started hearing right outside my bedroom door. That I prayed with everything I had that this was my dad messing with me. Then my doorknob jiggled. Whoever was on the other side tried pushing the door open. Thank God it was an old, heavy door with an old, sturdy lock. The sounds were still perfectly synced with what I was hearing through the phone. Then whoever was out there knocked on my door. 3 deliberate knocks. I had a sudden idea. I merged the 2 phone calls together so my uncle could hear everything. When the calls merged, I yelled into the phone, "Uncle T, it's not my dad. Get here now." I also yelled that whoever was in the house was on the phone with us right now. My uncle seemed to fully wake up and understand the severity of the situation. He started yelling into the phone things like, "I'm coming right now, you son of a bitch," and "I'm calling the cops." The no caller ID line hung up immediately. I heard footsteps quickly move away from my door and head back down the hallway. That all but confirmed it definitely wasn't my dad. My uncle told me to stay in my bedroom with the door locked. He was on his way. I wasn't a little kid, but I wasn't some big strong guy either. I was a skinny 19-year-old. My uncle knew I was in real danger. He lived in the same town, but the 7 minutes it took him to get to my house felt like the longest 5 years of my entire life. I stayed in my room, barely breathing, listening to every sound. Finally, I heard the familiar voice of my uncle screaming from downstairs. I rushed out of my room and ran down to meet him. Just having him there made everything feel safer. We called the cops together while searching the house for anything stolen or disturbed. The TV in the living room was still on. Before the police arrived, we found the kitchen window completely open. Wide open, enough for someone to climb through. We immediately told the police this when they got there. They did what I imagine was a standard search of the premises, having us lead them through the house but staying behind them for safety. We cleared every room. Whoever had been inside was gone now. After the cops finished their search, they asked to see the no caller ID calls in my recent call log. I showed them, and one of the officers told us that even though it says no caller ID, sometimes they can still request phone records and trace where the call came from. They said it could take a few days, but they'd follow up with us. My uncle stayed over that night, which helped me feel safer, though neither of us slept much. We kept every single light in the house on, like little kids afraid of the dark. A few days later, one of the officers called me back with an update. Surprisingly, They'd been able to trace the number. And it belonged to someone I actually knew. An old acquaintance from high school. Not a friend, not an enemy, just someone who had my number and knew my address. I hadn't seen or talked to him in years. The police asked if I wanted to come with them when they questioned him. My uncle and I both went, since he'd been there during the incident. When we arrived at the guy's house, his dad answered the door. The moment he saw the police, he called his son downstairs without asking any questions. I could see it in the guy's face immediately. He was nervous. Genuinely nervous. The officer asked him directly if he'd made those calls to my number. He immediately said no. Then he claimed his phone had been stolen a few days earlier. He said he lost it at a party and never got it back. The cop asked why he didn't report it stolen. He just shrugged and said he was planning to get a new phone anyway, so he didn't bother. The officer told him they might follow up if needed, and that was basically it. His dad just stood there the whole time, watching, but he never said a single word. No defense of his son, no questions, nothing. There was no dramatic confession, no arrest, no closure. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The look on his face when he came to the door. Was it guilt, or just the natural nervousness anyone would have when police show up at their house? If his phone really had been stolen, that meant someone took it specifically to call me and break into my parents' house. And honestly, that's even scarier than if it had been him. Because that means someone went through a lot of effort to target me specifically. I still don't have answers. I don't know if he was lying or telling the truth. But I never felt completely safe in that house again. It was a weekend like so many others. The usual group of friends was getting ready to meet up at Cody's house to pregame before going out to the bars. This was post-college, that we were all around 23 or 24 at the time. Cody's house was often our go-to spot for pre-gaming and post-gaming, mainly because he had this cool finished basement where his parents couldn't hear us, but also because his parents were pretty chill and didn't mind us being there. It was just the four of us that night. Cody, Randy, Jake, and me. Once everyone arrived, we decided who was calling the Uber, and then we were out. We spent the next few hours hopping between a bunch of dive bars and eventually ended up at this dance bar downtown. By the end of the night, Cody and I were exhausted. We decided to head home while Randy and Jake wanted to stay out later. Cody called an Uber back to his place, and when we got there, he offered me the pull-out couch in his basement. I'd crashed there plenty of times before, so it was no big deal. He came downstairs with me to help set up the couch, and while we were down there, we ended up playing a game of Madden. I've always been terrible at Madden, so he absolutely destroyed me. I didn't want a rematch. I was tired and drunk and just wanted to sleep off the alcohol before the inevitable hangover got even worse. Cody went back upstairs, shut the door to the basement, and I was left alone in the darkness. The only things keeping that basement from being completely pitch black were the small lights from the cable box clock under the TV, the red standby light on the TV itself, and this slight green glow coming from a Heineken mini fridge on the other side of the room. That mini fridge also provided some weirdly relaxing white noise, this constant low hum that actually helped me fall asleep. So I settled in, got comfortable, and pretty quickly passed out. I don't know how much time passed, but I woke up at some point and it was still dark. I had no idea what time it was, but I knew it was still late at night or super early in the morning. That 3 or 4 a.m. time frame. My mouth felt like cotton. I could barely even move my tongue. I'd stupidly forgotten to bring down a bottle of water before going to sleep, and after drinking all that alcohol, my body was screaming for hydration. That familiar, miserable feeling that anyone who's woken up hungover and thirsty knows all too well. I tried to ignore it at first. I rolled over to look at the Heineken fridge, thinking maybe there was a bottle of water in there, but I already knew it was just stocked with beer. And then, for whatever reason, my eyes drifted to the opposite corner of the room. At first, I thought my eyes were just playing tricks on me. The darkness can do that, especially when you're drunk and half asleep. But I could swear I was looking at a black mass in the corner. A dark shape that I definitely didn't remember being there before. I tried to wait for my eyes to adjust better, expecting the black mass to resolve into something normal. Maybe a coat hanging on a coat rack, or a pile of stuff Cody had left there. But the longer I stared, the more I realized something was wrong. It was moving. Not dramatically, but subtly. Shifting slightly. And it was tall. Way taller than any coat rack. It was a person. Someone was standing in the corner of the basement, just watching me. The amount of restraint I had to exercise to not scream in that moment was insane. Every instinct in my body wanted to yell or jump up or run, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't think it was Cody just based on the sheer height alone. This figure was tall, definitely taller than Cody. But I had to figure out how to get out of there without panicking, without letting this person know I'd seen them. After what felt like the most tense couple of minutes of my entire life, I sat up slowly and fake yawned, stretching like I'd just woken up naturally. I started muttering to myself, talking out loud like I was half asleep and annoyed. Things like, "Ugh, I'm so thirsty, and why didn't I bring water down here?" Anything to give the appearance that I was completely oblivious to the figure in the corner and was just going upstairs to get a drink. I stood up from the couch and started walking toward the stairs. But to get to the stairs, I had to walk closer to that corner. Closer to whoever was standing there. And perhaps the single most terrifying moment of my entire life was when I had to turn to the right to reach the staircase, briefly turning my back to this person, just praying I wouldn't feel hands grab me from behind. I made it to the stairs and started walking up. I didn't run, I didn't rush. I took it slow and normal, like I was just groggily going to get water. But when I was about halfway up the stairs, curiosity got the better of me. I glanced back down into the basement. The black mass had moved. It was now standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me. I could confirm now, without any doubt, it was definitely a person. A tall figure, just standing there completely still, staring up at me in the darkness that I almost tripped as I started sprinting up the rest of the stairs. I slammed the basement door shut behind me and immediately started running up the second flight of stairs to the upper level where Cody's bedroom was. I burst into his room, shook him awake, and yelled at him that there was someone in his basement and he needed to wake up his dad right now. During all this commotion, I heard a loud slam from downstairs. I pointed toward the sound and yelled, "See? Did you hear that?" Cody jumped out of bed, and we ran to his parents' room. I shook his dad awake and told him there was someone in the basement. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He immediately got out of bed and ran down both flights of stairs to the basement, noting out loud that the basement door was now wide open. I definitely closed it when I came up. Cody's dad yelled at Cody to call 911, and Cody did. When we followed Cody's dad down to the basement, we also noticed the back door to the house was now open. The person had escaped. The three of us went out to the backyard to search, then checked the front yard and even some of the neighboring yards, all while Cody was still on the phone describing everything to the 911 operator that we searched for maybe 15 minutes before the police finally arrived. They did a full search of the property and the house, then formally wrote up a report of the incident. By the end of it, some neighbors had woken up and come outside asking if everything was okay. The whole situation had turned into this whole neighborhood thing. By that point, the adrenaline had worn off and I was sobered up, terrified, and just wanted to go home. As soon as the police left, I went back inside to talk with Cody and his parents for a bit, but then I said goodbye and called an Uber. Cody offered to drive me, but I refused. I just wanted to get out of there. I was genuinely worried for them that night, wondering if whoever had been in the basement might come back. But there was no way I was sleeping in that basement after what happened. In fact, I never slept there again. We still had pre-games and hangouts at Cody's house after that, But the feeling in that basement completely changed for me. For a long time afterward, I'd always glance at that corner when I was down there, just thinking back to that night. That black mass, standing perfectly still in the darkness, watching me sleep. I still don't know who it was or what they wanted, but I'll never forget the feeling of realizing I wasn't alone in that room.